Hello and welcome back to a very late episode of Through the Eyes of Enji, where we're trying to review 101 films in 365 days. We're doing this to raise money for We Are With You and the Shawbury Village Players. We Are With You is a confidential service for young people and families affected by drugs and alcohol in Shropshire. Their work includes information, support and advice about drugs and alcohol, one-to-one support, group work, a parent-carer helpline, help to make decisions about lifestyle, links to other services, early intervention, and harm reduction. Now, if you've known me for any amount of time, then you'll probably be aware of the Shawbury Village Players. Village Players are a community theatre group that operate out of, unsurprisingly, Shawbury. We put on murder mysteries, Shakespeare, pantomimes, pretty much anything you can think of, we'd be willing to give it a go. Now, if you have suffered with your mental health in the past, like I have, then you might appreciate as well as I what a massive impact it would make to lose something like the Shawbury Village Players. So please consider dropping me a few quid, nominate a film, we'll give it a go. Some I'll hate, some I'll love, some I'll be utterly confused by, which is a good segue into talking about today's film, which is nominated by my father John. We're talking about Dune. Dune was released in 1984. It was directed and written by David Lynch, and it was based on the novel by Frank Herbert. Now, it starred Kyle MacLachlan as Paul Atreides, Francesca Annis as the Lady Jessica, Patrick Stewart as Gurney Halleck, Sting as Feed Ruther, Fade? Not sure, you're probably going to correct me if I'm wrong. Kenneth Macmillan, played Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, and Richard Jordan played Duncan Idaho. If you're wondering why I've missed out so many characters, it's because there are so many goddamn characters, and a great many of them are too difficult to pronounce for my poor dyslexic brain. The storyline: a duke's son leads desert warriors against the Galactic Emperor and his father's evil nemesis when they assassinate his father, and he moves on to free the desert world from the Emperor's rule. Now that is the shortest and least complicated summary of Dune. Buckle up, folks, we're on for one hell of a ride, because this one's confusing as hell. Now, please keep in mind, this review is going to contain a few spoilers for Dune, and you also need to keep in mind that I haven't read the book it's based on. Okay, so in what is probably the most no-shit Sherlock statement I've issued thus far with any of these reviews, Dune's weird. If there was a holy trinity of films that represented the main aspects of the golden age of science fiction, then I'm pretty sure that Star Wars would represent the childish side of the golden age of sci-fi. Flash Gordon, and on a side note, please don't nominate Flash Gordon for me. Gonzo, I'm looking directly at you. Flash Gordon represented the horny side, and Dune definitely showcased the weird and the icky side. Now, make no mistake, whilst he may have hated the final version of the film, Dune is definitely a David Lynch film, and perhaps is shown most purely in the villains of the film. I had to check in with Colin whilst I was watching the film, because he's at least tried to read the book, asking if the villains in the film were quite as cartoonish as they appear in the film. It was a bit of an eye-opener watching Baron Harkonnen floating around, cackling evilly as he barks out his lines like a really bad Bond villain. It made me chuckle like I do when I'm watching a film which is intentionally bad, but at the same time, I was kind of groaning inside because I was trying really, really hard to take the film seriously. And just while we're on the subject of villains, I have absolutely no idea what to make of Sting in this film. I'll say this much: Sting looks like he's having fun, but when he emerges from being steam cooked, I had no idea what to make of it. I was trying to take the film seriously. I was annoyed from the opening scenes when it was revealed the overarching villains of the piece were revealed right from the get-go. And it felt like it would have been like revealing the major players behind the big plots in Game of Thrones right in episode 1, as an example. Only because the bones of the story and the world building were generally doing a really good job of setting things up. Whilst I don't know why they tried to include the Emperor's daughter in the film, considering she played absolutely no part in the film, apart from being the narrator and having maybe one line in an opening scene, and unless this was a really bad way of trying to set up a sequel, which, come to think of it, probably might well have been the case. But anyway, as a interesting sci-fi political thriller, I started to get quite invested. And then it all really violently went to shit. Because the setup might have been good, but the execution's just fucking terrible. The rest of the film, after the various setups for the major characters and the inevitable conflict which is going to take place on Dune, and bear in mind that setup ain't exactly fine art, it's followed up by one of the most stunningly batshit awful sequences I've ever seen, as the Navigators transport our primary characters from House Atreides to Dune itself. And interestingly, I remember when Doctor Strange came out, I knew people who their main criticism of Doctor Strange was one of the initial sequences that is basically some special effects artist showing off with all these weird and wonderful and colourful images they can create, and though these friends of mine saying, "Oh, that was a waste of time, it made no sense," but at the same time they praised Dune, which had this really bizarre sequence with the Navigators that felt almost dreamlike in a way, and this is like a lot of the film. And you know, if you've read the book, it might well make sense to you. All this weirdness and this intrigue and how these characters are might be reflected from the page, but saying you have to read the book to understand what the hell is going on in the film is hardly a glowing recommendation. It's not exactly a rarity. Certainly, if you look at the Zack Snyder versions of Superman and Batman, which had when they were promoting the film, there was this big push of, this isn't your father's Batman, this isn't your father's Superman, and yet at the same time you're expected to know who these characters are. So you're supposed to know that Superman doesn't kill, when at the end of Man of Steel he obviously offs General Zod. But nothing in the film before that has actually set up that aspect of Superman's character. So you're expected to know that from the page and from previous incantations of the Man of Steel. But yeah, you're supposed to know that. And this is what happens when I haven't got notes in front of me. When I go off on a tangent. Yeah, you're supposed to know that information already, despite the fact that we've been told it's not that version of Superman. And even some films do this really well. As if you watch the Harry Potter films, having never read the books, you don't lose anything. The only thing you're missing is the added depth. And the same is with The Lord of the Rings. If you know the backstory of Middle-earth from The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, and The Silmarillion, then that gives an added depth to the characters, because you know a bit more about their history. You know why everyone is so scared of Sauron. You know where Gandalf has come from and his backstory and what he's been doing. But you don't lose anything by not knowing that when you watch The Lord of the Rings. And I wonder if that might have been a problem with Dune, because Dune has a really messy screenplay. Actors' plot lines are set up and go absolutely nowhere. And there's characters who die it's set up like we're supposed to care. So my follow-up next question to readers of the books will be, who the fuck is Duncan? Why does the film suggest I should give a damn about him dying in a really stupid manner with terrible looking special effects, which actually made me laugh out loud at what's supposed to be a poignant death scene. And incidentally, Laura rolled her eyes and went off to spend her time doing something far more productive than watching Dune. And speaking of those special effects, the personal shields are legendary for looking bloody awful. And considering this came out nearly a decade after Star Wars, I can't help but think there was a better way of showing these effects for the personal shields. And it's not just special effects like that, it's practical effects are bloody useless as well. Because if you look at the guns that are used in the battle sequences in the film, there's very rarely either the sign of a projectile or any sign of impact when the weapons are fired. And there's no consistency because sometimes the guns are lasers, sometimes they're not. And it doesn't add up or make any sense. And it looks just awful. And come to think of it, during the initial battle on Dune, 10 battalions of the Emperor's elite guard make up the majority of the soldiers that are deployed. And they are in boiler suits, and they don't seem to fire guns or use conventional weapons apart from throwing people. Or in later battles, they get eaten. One or the other. Occasionally, very occasionally, there's a shot or a moment of the film which picks your interest up for at least being visually interesting for a moment. But to be honest, once you've seen one sandworm, repeating the sight of them appearing a dozen times continues to deaden your mind to what's going on all the more. The crowd shots look lazy, cheap, and are repeated several times. And weirdly, when the film started after the opening credits, watching it on a high-definition TV, the sets and everything, whilst visually unique in their design, it looks like a 60s version of 60s episode of Doctor Who, with how they visually come across, far more than what is set up as an 80s action sci-fi thriller. And to be honest, Flash Gordon looks better than this. It embraces the cheese factor of the material better, and it's more visually and thematically more interesting than what's going on watching Dune. And I seem to remember when I was growing up, I was told that I had to concentrate whilst I was watching Dune to follow what was going on. But watching the film now, I think it's more that the film's so badly put together, appallingly structured, and because you have no prior knowledge of the characters, which seems almost essential in places, and how the story develops, it's really hard to keep a track of what's going on due to how obscure everything feels rather than any complexity in the source material. I mean, there are arguments that Dune isn't really a film in the conventional sense, more just a collection of ideas that have been thrown onto the screen with the same kind of loose hand-waving that associates it with a book that broke new ground when it was released because of its themes, because of its setting, because of its world building. But the carcass of that groundbreaking nature of the book has now been picked so clean by things that have imitated it since, which is a similar problem that Ender's Game had when they made a film version of that. And that's a shame, really, because when you watch Dune now, nothing about it feels unique, because it's all been adapted and used better elsewhere. I will say that Dune is unique for its look, and when it comes out of its shell and comes across like a music video, there's some really unique moments that are quite impressive for what they are. But other than that, it's a sprawling mess of a thing that we're getting a new version of soon. And to be honest, I can wait quite a while before watching anything based on this material again. But then, with the new effects available in the modern age and the ability to split the film into two parts before releasing it to give it more breathing room for the material, there may be something in Dune that makes it deeper and more interesting than the mess that was David Lynch's version turned out to be. Now, there is the elephant in the room, and that's the other thing that makes Dune unique for what it is, and that's the method of trying to bridge the gap between a character thinking on film. Because in the book, so much of it is the thoughts of the characters, and David Lynch's attempt to bring that into the film. And how they do it is the camera will focus on a character's face, and you'll hear their voice whispering over the top. If that sounds really goofy, that's good, because it is really, really fucking goofy. There's always been this problem of transferring characters from book to film when the character's most interesting aspect is how their thought process works. This was a massive problem for the Da Vinci Code, in particular, which is kind of the gold standard for me of a character whose thoughts are their defining factor is their intelligence and how they think through things. And unfortunately, in film, being a visual medium, often that transfers to a character explaining something to someone standing near them. And you do have to acknowledge this attempt at solving the problem. I'm just really glad we haven't seen it done again. You know, even the really fucking daft Mind Palace concept in the later seasons of Sherlock was another attempt at it, and that's pretty shit too. In summary, fucking hell, this review is late because I have been trying to work out how the hell I was even going to approach the review of Dune. Now, I do seem to remember when I was younger, I enjoyed watching Dune, and I wonder if that was because I didn't get too invested in trying to work out what the hell was going on, or when I was at uni, one night when I was very, very drunk in my first year of uni, it was an amusing debate as to what the hell was going on, I think. But watching the film now, sober, I just found it baffling, ugly, and just plain bloody dreadful. The one thing I can say, because the film looking unique does not count as praise. The colour tone is something unique about this film, and it's terrible. And when I start complaining about the colour tone in the film, then you know it's bad enough to be worth mentioning. The only bit of damning praise I will give is I'll say that the actors do give it their all. Patrick Stewart has, at this point, literally played shit and brought his A game for that, and for the many, many, many problems in Kenneth Macmillan's performance as the Baron Harkonnen. He's clearly having a great time playing this grotesque flying monster of a villain who pervs over young men and Sting. But even that said, Dune's awful. If you want to look at the monster in the cage and poke fun at how grotesque it looks, I rented it for £2 on Amazon, and I felt pretty robbed by that. It's just dreadful. But if you want to see, it's like towards the beginning of lockdown, I realised that one of the things I'd never actually done, despite being really excited for its release for years, and having spoken about it and its historical relevance to the medium and the history behind it, is I'd never actually played Duke Nukem Forever from start to finish, so I didn't know how bad or good it was. And I know a lot of folk started playing it and just couldn't get into it because how bad the opening is. Much like Daikatana before it. So I sat down and I played my way through Duke Nukem Forever from start to finish, because I wanted to see how bad it could be. It's awful, by the way. And you might find some pleasure in watching Dune for that reason. To, come in, look at the freak, See how it twitches when you poke it with a stick? I can't think of any other reason why you would sit and watch Dune. It's just awful. And I still really don't have a bloody clue what to think about Sting. Right, shall we find out what we're doing next? Okay. Come on, give me something good. Give me something good. Right, so, as a way of kicking me in the dick while I'm down, next time we're going to cover Barbie Princess Charm School. The time has come. I've done some research into this. Because I thought when this got suggested that it was just going to be like a 20-minute animated film, it's an hour and a half long. And I've got to sit and watch it tomorrow. Great. Okay, so thank you for watching. Please subscribe to these videos. Like it, share it. Consider throwing me a few quid. We are about we're 32 quid off the target now. And I appreciate this is only like review number 10. But as the days are getting longer and staying lighter a bit longer than I am able to record more easily and not having to squeeze it in on my lunch break. So, thank you again for watching. Take care. Speak to you soon.